Welcome to Draconis, to Festival Draconis 2024.
Where?
My English is really good. And to this panel, Roleplaying 101, Playing Like a Pro with Soli Kipi. Well, we have a special thanks to our sponsors this year.
Oh.
Arcana Creation, Gnome Archivist, and Les Terres d'Obsidia. And now, Soli Kipi.
Merci. Yeah. Let's learn and stuff. All right. Thank you for coming to this. We'll say it again. Roleplay 101, or also voicing, characters, improv, and probably some other stuff I don't know. Please clap. Thank you. This is a webinar / seminar I've given multiple times to professional GMs from around the globe online, but I've modified it a bit to make it for players and GMs. We're just going to be going over the basics of role play, which means all this stuff, and maybe some other stuff too, IDK. Okay, let's go. So, what are we going to try to accomplish today? What am I trying to instill in you all? First, primary goal, the most important one for me here today, for us, I guess, is to help with imposter syndrome, help you be vulnerable during games. Imposter syndrome is kind of more of a GM thing, but it also hits players. But basically what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to make you comfortable having fun, being vulnerable with each other, role-playing, opening yourselves up, making sure that you feel like no matter what kind of role play you're doing, you belong at the table. So that's number one. That's the thing we're going to be working on the most. Number two, I'm going to try to offer basic frameworks for characterization and role play. That is all to say, I'm going to try to give you ways to think about role playing, to think about expressing yourself, basic mechanical stuff, how to do silly voices, and so forth, that you can practice, that you can think about while you're trying to learn. And number three, this is more for GMs here, but just to help you be more confident in your improv and give you more basic skills in improvising games so that you're not getting as much burnout when you're doing like 2 hours of prep a game. These days I do about 15 minutes of prep a game, so maybe you can take some of the skills we learn here and apply them. And for masks, it's 0. All right, so who the hell am I anyways? Who's this guy sitting here telling you things? Well, I am Soli KP, aka Salman Corbett. I'm a professional GM. This is what I do for a living full-time. I run games, and I specialize in improvised games specifically, but I also run normal, everyday games, 5e, Pathfinder, Masks, Root, Forged in the Dark games, whatever. I'm also an onstage improviser. This is a shot from me running improvised D&D on stage at Theatre St. Catherine here in Montreal. And I've been, and I run a lot of improv games like this one, Curse of Strahd, but I didn't read it, which is exactly what the name implies. It's been insanity so far, and that's what we like when we role play. And I've been doing improv for a long time. This is me about 15 years ago, accepting a little trophy from Andrew Fung, who is from Kin's Convenience Store, if you recognize him. We'll talk a little bit more about Andrew later. And here's me last year, still doing it. This is at Sunday Night Improv, which I do or attend every week downtown here in Montreal, Theatre St. Catherine. So come on down to that. Anyways, that's who I am. The point being, I know a few things, I hope, and I've learned a few things while I've been doing this job for 4 years. And my hope is to give you some of the things that I've learned that I found to be very helpful, that I've learned through multiple disciplines, including improv and stuff, to help you maybe feel a little better about your role play. All right, boom, explosion. You got to be on your toes for role play, all right? You never know what's going to come around the next corner. I forget I put that there every time. Okay, let's go. So, first, what the hell is improv anyways? What are we talking about here? This is where I can put my useless anthropology degree to good use. So, let's divide up this word here. I believe the same principles apply en français. But a role, very fancy language, a ritualized or expected holistic behavior, often referring to performance. In other words, it's how you're supposed to act. It's how you're supposed to behave. In our context, where we're performing, it's your character. You're playing a role, you're playing a character, or multiple characters if you're the GM or whatever. And this is all good, and this is usually what we think about working on when we think about role play, right? So we think about the role in the game. But what I want to emphasize here is the play part of role play, because I think this is actually understated and maybe even secretly the most important thing. So play, to engage in a suspended state of reality, blah, 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 a bunch of fancy words. Basically, it's having fun playing pretend with other people, being in that social environment, making connections with other people. Because if we didn't want that, then we would be playing Baldur's Gate 3 and not playing games with each other. When we play role-playing games, we're there to make social connections with other people. And that is what we're really going to try to work on today, because my thesis here, if you want to call it that, is what's really fulfilling about role-playing games are those social connections. So let's try to work on those. But before we continue, I got Q&A sections after each section. Oh, wait. Okay, sorry, I wanted to talk about this concept. Vulnerability. If you take anything else away from today's Q&A, whatever you want to call this, it's vulnerability. It's to be more vulnerable. I know that's a big ask, but that's kind of everything that we're going to work on today is basically just being vulnerable. All the skills we work on, you can only work on by being vulnerable. And by the way, the only way you can have fun while you're playing a game is by being vulnerable. So we're going to maybe even practice a little together today, give you a little opportunity to be a little goofy with each other, be a little vulnerable, shall we say, in this controlled environment we have here. Because when you're vulnerable, well, then you start having fun. All right, here's the question section. So before we move on to, I have a bunch of here's improv and voices and story-based characters, but we're leaving some space for questions, and we'll also have a big question period at the end. Any questions about all those concepts I just talked about here? I know I threw a lot of words at you there, so anything to clarify before we move on? Thanks. All right, then let's go. Let's get into the meat and potatoes. Section 1, improv. Who's this guy? An improv person. Good guess. Wow. That's Jeff Improv of Improv Industries. This is Keith Johnstone. He was the creator of theater sports, which is the most popular format of improv in the world. He also was one of the, it's disputed, but he was one of the guys who basically conceptualized what we call nowadays storytelling improv. That is, getting on stage together with another person, making a connection with them, creating a relationship, trying to find some sort of conflict, and then resolving it. In other words, making a story spontaneously, or what you might call role play. Keith Johnstone founded the Loose Moose Theater in Calgary, which is where I started learning improv. So I'm raised in the Johnstone school, you might say, and we're going to be using what he wrote about storytelling improv as a basis for this presentation. So, Keith wrote in the book Theater Sports, which had a big impact on me when I was younger, about the things that hold us back when we're doing improv. And specifically, he outlined 3 fears. 3 fears that Keith says we all have when we get in front of other people and we try to perform. And we're going to go over them because this is probably some combination of these things when you sit at a table and you're like, should I do this voice? Should I be this person? Is this offer a good offer? And then you don't. It's probably because one of these things is going, or multiples of these things are going through your brain. Or if you're GMing and you're like, should I prep this or that, or whatever. These are the things we're basically trying to overcome when we practice the skills of improvisation. So, what the hell are they anyways? 1, the fear of being unfunny or uninteresting. That is the fear of being boring. The fear of not emotionally engaging the people that you're speaking with, that you're interacting with. Is my character too boring? Do they not have anything going on? Are my players even paying attention to this box text I'm reading? is a constant and pretty omnipresent fear, but it's kind of a fleeting one. It comes and goes. Usually it's not one that controls the entire session, but it can halt us in a moment. The second one is one that's really common among new players and GMs, the fear of being unoriginal. This one you probably all felt regularly. Will my players know that if I tell them, I'm just asking my players to take the bell to the Shadowlands. Isn't that like taking the ring to Mordor? They'll totally see through it. I'm just ripping off Lord of the Rings. But of course, none of that matters, right? This is one I find we tend to overcome pretty quickly the more experience we get, because we realize even if we're literally making the players be hobbits and take the ring to Mordor, even if we're literally making our character named Aragorn, when we start playing, we're going to run into other people that we're interacting with and have players with agency and the dice that cause random things, and that naturally causes whatever story we started with to diverge into its own creative thing that we make together. It's kind of the beauty of roleplay. All right, fear number 3, the fear of being offensive. Now, Keith was writing in the 70s, so he mostly meant like talking about Jesus and swearing and stuff. But I think this is more of an insidious one than we give it credit for, because this is also people-pleasing behavior, right? This is when we're afraid to say something or say no, or even just make an assertion with our characters or with our game because we're afraid of annoying people or peeving the specific person off, or maybe not confronting a problem player. This is a very insidious one, the scope of which goes well beyond this presentation, but suffice to say, hopefully we can work on it a little bit. And I have a sneaky 4th fear that I like to add to this list. So are you ready? And this one is the one that mostly applies to game masters, but also applies to, wow. Thank you. All right, here we go. It's the fear of losing control. This is one that in particular I think applies to GMs, but kind of hits all of us, but especially GMs, so GMs here, pay attention. GMs spend a lot of time being like, I'm going to make this awesome dungeon, and they're going to get to the end, and there's going to be this cool boss, and there's going to be this plot twist where the villain's the guy's father, and they're going to find that in 20 sessions later. But who knows if that's actually going to happen, right? There's so much random stuff that happens in an RPG. And that's the beauty of a role-playing game, is the randomness, is that we're giving the agency of what happens over to each other in the dice, and we're trusting that we'll make a narrative together. That's what makes the game fun. But we're still like, I really want this vision that I have to happen. And as a consequence, we're really afraid of losing control. We try to grab a hold and steer, or railroad, as the term is used here, in a certain direction, piling over each other's agency. This can also happen to players as well, usually in the form of tantrums. But suffice to say, it's a common one. And this one is this is one we're going to be focusing on the most, because it's antithetical to roleplay, as it were. The whole point of roleplay is embracing the randomness of the dice and each other's offers and giving up that control. All right, so I called you all out. How do we work on this? There's 3 basic skills that basically any improv teacher will tell you. Might come in different formulations. Maybe they'll say 2, maybe they'll say 4, and it's extended out. I give it in 3. There might be a 4th sneaky one, I won't say. But what you'll notice about these 3 skills is that they all apply to interacting with other people. They all apply to affecting the other people you're at the table with. And they're all skills. They're all skills. So these are all things that we grow and we work on and take a lifetime to master. And they apply outside of role-playing, you'll probably find. But these are all things we work on together, and every time we try them, we get better. So, skill number 1, listening. You all paying attention? Good. Thanks. So, when I say listening, I don't just mean hearing and internalizing information, like you're doing now, which is very nice. What I mean is showing the people present that you are there, that you care about what they're saying, and that you're ready to work with them on it. You know, in person, this might come in the form of looking them in the eyes and smiling and hanging on every word. And online, you might have a tendency to give back channel feedback instead, like, yeah, that's an awesome idea. I love that. Generally, I find good GMs and good players do this naturally, but this is the hardest skill, if we're being honest. It takes a lifetime to master. We all zone out sometimes, and sometimes we get upset or something, and we don't pay as much attention as we should, or we get anxious because of those fears we talked about previously. But if you always go back to listening, you'll always re-engage with the other people you're with. And there's a word in the English language for this kind of listening. It's called flirting, but obviously, in a non-romantic sense here, don't flirt with your players. Just platonically flirt by showing them that you're present and you care, because this is what you do when you want to show somebody you like them, right? This is what you do. You look them in the eyes, and you care, and you listen. So do that. All right. Skill number 2, yes-anding. This is the one you probably all know. It's one that gets bandied around in circles a lot. Hopefully I don't have to explain it too much, but when you get an offer, that could be a piece of dialogue, that could be a roll of the dice, that could be a sound cue, it could be a box text, whatever. You take it, you accept it, and then you elaborate upon it and you further the narrative. And that's kind of, we do this naturally when we're playing role-playing. This is what the engine of storytelling is I'm gonna go to the park. Yes, and I'll bring some sandwiches. Yes, and there's an orc in front of us. Yes, and I'll stab him, and so on and so forth. You don't always need to go to violence, but look, it's a role-playing conference. One thing I do want to say about this is that a lot of I see on Reddit a lot, people get caught up in the grammar of this in role-playing circles, and they're like, well, you can yes and, but there's also no and no but, and yes but. And the point I'm making here is that these are all actually the same thing. The point is that you're accepting what this person is giving you, and you're elaborating upon it in some way that furthers the story, or at least the system and rules, and makes everything clearer and gets people involved. The antithesis of yes-anding is what we call blocking, which is when you don't elaborate. Yes-anding would be, let's go to the park. No, we have to kill the orcs here in front of us. At least you're furthering the narrative, whereas blocking would be, let's go to the park. No, you can see the difference. All right. Skill number 3. Inspiring your partner, or making your partner look good, or making your players look good, or making your players look like heroes, or inspiring your GM. There's a lot of different ways to put this, but basically, always focusing the energy that you're giving into helping the other people at the table further their characters. Because when you do this, and you put all your trust through all 3 of these things into the people you're with, they're going to naturally, as human beings, because this is what humans do the same back to you. They're going to inspire you. They're going to set you up for that slam of the volleyball. I hope that metaphor was clear. They'll set you up. This is a kind of well-known principle in GM circles, especially making your players look like heroes, right? But I want to emphasize this also applies to players. You can set each other up, and it's good. It's good to do that. Try it. It's fun, I swear. All right. Last skill. Yes, there was a secret 4th sneaky one, but this one's a sneaky one because it doesn't necessarily apply to other people, and that's fail gracefully. Out of all the things all the skills we discussed here today, this is the one you can practice the most, and it's probably the one that's most important for yourself to practice, because when you can fail gracefully, when you can have something happen and be like, either, I don't like that, let's dig down deeper and see where this goes, or I didn't like that, can we rewind, or I didn't like that, let's just move on, or whatever, and do that quickly without getting bogged down into the details of what happened, the less you worry about failing in the future, and the more you're able to go forward with confidence and do all these other things and not be bogged down in your head with all those fears that are being provoked by you failing. Because the reality is, whenever we're doing any kind of narrative format, whether that's improv or RPGs or whatever, there is no fail state, right? We're just telling a story together. There's nothing wrong with that. And even when you're as a GM, if you make a miscall, you accidentally skip somebody in initiative, it's a skill to be like, Okay, well, you know what? Let's just go back to your turn. You can just go now. Or do you mind if we go later? That's a skill that you learn, that you become confident in. The more you practice it, the better you get at it. The more you fail gracefully, the less you fail because you're not actually failing. All right. A lot of things said. Last thing, 3 mantras. There's no sneaky fourth thing this time, I swear. Or what you might call 3 mottos, whatever. These are the 3 things I tell myself whenever I'm playing a game or running a game, or improvising for that matter. These are 3 things that I found very helpful. Just to tell yourself when you're sitting there and you don't know what the hell you're going to do next or what you're doing, this is what my head jumps to. Mantra number 1, never plan past the first offer. This is especially good if you're a GM, very helpful. Obviously, if you're running like Masks or Forged in the Dark or something, this probably comes naturally. But even if you're running D&D, I've found, like I said, I have my prep times down to about 15 minutes because I live by this principle. I don't bring to the players anything other than the first NPC they're going to encounter. It could be, the first offer could be a whole dungeon. That's like your special episode. But it could also be like, I'm just going to bring a sound cue and we're going to go from there. You bring them one offer, one thing. You can also, while your players are sitting there and you're like, what the hell am I going to do next? And they're arguing about what their plan is next. It's another time to do this. Once you start planning past that first offer, you're going to start worrying about the future and you're going to have that fear of losing control. But if you just plan the first offer, then you can put all of your emotional energy, all of your time, all of the care that you had about what will happen into this one thing. And because you probably know the other people at the table around you, it's going to be a good thing because you will know instinctively what's going to inspire them. So just try to focus all your energy in that. Trust me, it takes practice, but it works. Fail gracefully and keep going. You'll tell a story. All right, next thing. Get yourself into trouble. This one comes naturally to players a lot, but I would also encourage this one for GMs. When your players, this happens to me a lot because I run a lot of games online. This is just an example. I have pre-made maps by artists like Che and Peku, awesome map makers. My players walk into a room, and I've just imported this map. I don't know what the hell's on it. And they're like, what's in that chest over there? If I was just starting as a GM, I'd be like, oh, that's just part of the map. That's not actually there. But nowadays, I'm like, I don't know, open it. And then they open it, and I'm like, there's a box, and inside is a raccoon. And the raccoon has a name tag that says Toby on it. I don't know what that raccoon's doing there. I don't know why it's there. I don't know why he's named Toby. It doesn't matter. I'm getting myself into trouble. And then my players will probably come up with their own ideas on the spot. Oh, this must have been left by Jerry the orc, he's leaving us clues or whatever. It doesn't matter. That's an idea for me. But even if they don't give me anything, we can just keep going until that solution's uncovered later. It doesn't matter if I know that now. I'm getting myself into trouble. And by the way, this is kind of the fun part of running role-playing games, is this, challenging yourself, building and telling stories together. Get yourself into trouble. Same with players, but we'll talk about more of that later. Okay, last thing, warm up. I know it's, when you come to the table, often you all sit down and then you're like making small talk for like 15 minutes and you're like eating Pringles. Maybe you've had a beer or two, and then you start, and the GM's like, okay, where were we last time? Right, you're in a cottage. Warm up. If you come with the energy, everyone else will pick up on it. What I do before my games now is literally play the ukulele and sing before I hop on the call. Or if I'm in an in-person game, I'll come in, and sit down, but I'll like go on a big bike ride before I get there. Just get the blood flowing, bring the energy, start up immediately. Trust me, it works. Warm up. It's good. It's good for you. Okay, that's it for improv section. I said a lot of things to you. Any questions about the things we've discussed so far? Please don't be shy. Any clarifications, comments, concerns? Wait.
first log,
Mm-hmm.
to me it seemed almost quite impossible because I always plan a lot in advance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't plan everything, but I have in my mind what at least the general tendency of the play game. So I don't know how I could do that. And I've been a master for I don't know 4 years. Or
Yeah, I mean, if you find it fulfilling and your games are fun, then you could ignore everything I just said. You know, these are mantras. These are just guidelines. And I totally also sometimes I do sit down and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna build this whole world, and this island's gonna be this, and this island's gonna be this, and so on and so forth. And that's fine, and it's cool to inspire yourself. It's just when you do that, if you're gonna do that, you have to be okay with letting some things go. Or, also, yeah, of course. I mean, if you've been doing this a while, you know that. Yeah,
what I planned never happened.
of course. And that's fine too. Or just explicitly being to the players, and I have also done this before, hey, this boss behind this door is actually really cool, so do you just want to like go anyways and do this? Like, it's totally okay to do that too. It's always, you know, if you're stuck or you're frustrated, it's totally okay to just explicitly be like, can we just do this anyways, or whatever, or not do this? Good question. Anything else? Yes.
Have there been like any times where you yourself as a DM or like a player has failed gracefully in a way where like, yeah, no, this is great. This is a wonderful like experience to have.
All the time.
An example?
The thing is, it's so natural. Sometimes it's hard to catch a lot of the time. Let me think. Was the game I was in yesterday, which was Girl by Moonlight? God. See, now here I am failing gracefully because I can't think of any examples because it happens all the time. Yes,
I have one for
please.
So, like I've just started playing The Walking Dead RPG, which is good. But at the end of the first session, they were like, "Oh, we're gonna be brother." Like, beginning of the session, they're like, "We're gonna be brother and sister. It's gonna be great. We're gonna have this great." At the end of the first session, gets shot by a sniper rifle, and the other player is like, "I want to take the shot." And then I'm like, sure, roll forward, succeeds. Character gets shot in the head, immediately dies. That's not what any of us expected to happen to that. But that moment was so exciting for both of those players. Like, oh, we want to play this as an ongoing game.
See, the thing is, I wouldn't even consider that failing at this point. You know, you're just telling a story together.
But I think just in the sense of like, not what anybody expected to happen, right?
Yeah. Well, that happens all the time. I mean, okay, that happens basically whenever I run masks, which you are in. You all do stuff all the time. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I have images in my brain all the time about what I think might happen, even maybe a plan, and I have to shed it immediately because the players are like, I want to go to, let's go to the store instead, or can we just sit down and talk with this person, or whatever? Or I think they're going to sit down and talk with this person, and they're like, I want to attack.
Sorry.
And I wish, you don't apologize. That's what it's all about, is the fun of that. That's the fun thing. And I could come up with a million examples if you gave me time, but I hope the picture's clear at least. You got a question?
Just back to the prep thing, more of a comment to steal your presentation. But like, I find having kind of a backup of stuff, like if you've been doing it for a long time, the more prep that you have available. Like I have a stack of NPC cards, right, that I've just built up over the years, and so I guess prep can be more about like possibilities than about story for me a lot of the time. It's just like, here are some pieces I can throw together if someone asks. It's not that the prep work wasn't there, but I'm not prepping for each session.
Yes, 100%. Always great to have a catalog.
I was reading a scenario from Avatar Legends, which I think is kind of a new...
Yeah, I've run it a few times.
Yeah, and I was taken aback by the fact that they say, well, this could be the culprit, but this could also be the culprit,
Uh-huh.
and this could also be the culprit,
Yeah.
and it's going to depend. And for me, it's kind of weird to start a game and not having, a clear path to resolution. Like it's gonna just evolve as you go. As it's still like scary to get into a game like that, so open-ended. It's like to drive a game when you're not experienced. To drive a game like that, not knowing like how it's gonna flow. I think that's scary.
In other words, you have, let's go back, a fear of losing control?
Not that much of suddenly being like, okay, what else? Because you have to build the story as it goes. So,
Yeah.
So because when you have a good scenario that has been worked for a long time, you have very good element like a book. It's like so much. But when you go there, how can you make something so interesting on the fly that is going to be as something that's it's like a master plan or something like that?
But therein lies the secret, my friend, because it's not you that's making the master
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
It's you and the players.
It's giving control.
Yes.
That's the.
And also, your players have no idea that this is the case.
I know.
They don't know that you don't know who Toby the raccoon is. All they know is that you put this here. I don't do this that often now. I'm more open with my players, as you can tell by like Curse of Strahd, but I didn't read it. But Matt Colville has a great mantra as well of, if you don't know, it's always in the book. Even if it's off the top of your head, it's totally okay to be like, let me check. Aveston. Even though, it's not in there. But you can give that illusion anyways. Players will never know.
You have
Yes.
to be good so that it has to flow.
Yeah. But it will flow. You just got to trust yourself. Fail gracefully. Last thing, and then we'll move on to the
I
next
was going
section.
to say it's the same as in theater, the old adage of like the audience hasn't read the script.
Yep.
Right? It's the same principle.
Or music. I remember when I was like 7 years old, my teacher would be like, if you mess up, just keep going. It's jazz. And then I played like the completely wrong key, and it was very obvious. But you know what? She made me believe in myself. All right. Section 2, practical application. This is the fun part. Voice and emotion. So so we talked a lot about high concepts there, making yourself vulnerable. Let's talk about actually putting that into practice. Let's just talk about practical, like voice acting and characterization, as we often call it. But before we do that, I just want to go back to the fact that all of these things are skills. They're all things you can practice. They're all things you will improve. And also the idea of being vulnerable. You can practice all of the things we're about to talk about as much as you want, in the shower, washing dishes, whatever. Scare your roommates. But it's once you get in front of other people, whether that's on stage or just at a table, all of those skills that you just practiced are going to exit out the side of your mind, and you're going to go right back to the basics. So you need to practice these in front of other people. And it's fun to do that. Be vulnerable. That's the point I'm making. All right. So what are the actual aspects of voice acting that we can practice? What I'm about to give you is not an exhaustive list. You may get other lists here and there. What I will say is I've taken courses, workshops with professional voice actors, and this is roughly the kind of list that they give. So hopefully you'll trust me on this. But here's different, you can think of the things I'm about to list as, say, sliders on a soundboard or a spectrum. Some of them multifocal. They can go in different directions. But they're all things you can adjust up and down independent of each other to make different voices. Number one is accent, of course. Often when people want to work on their voice acting, this is the first one they jump to. I want to make a good Scottish accent for my dwarves or whatever. But this one, I will say, is the most limiting once you adopt it, and also definitely the hardest to practice. What actually is an accent? It's a mixture of a few of the other things we're going to talk about and also phonemes. What's a phoneme? A phoneme is the most basic unit of sound that a human can make in speech, like t, v, whatever. So let's say I'm speaking in a southern accent and I say, I want to go to the store. If I'm speaking in a southern accent, when I say it would be the phoneme ah. I want to go to the store. But let's say I'm speaking in the, shall we call it Canadian accent. I would say, I want to go to the store. That's actually two phonemes, I-E, and that defines the accent. Dozens, possibly hundreds of differences like that in musicality and phonemes and so forth. And when you're doing an accent from a non-native speaker, it's because, for instance, if we're speaking en français, the phoneme th does not exist in French. So a French speaker will often say th or de instead, de probably if they're Quebecois. And that's where an accent comes from. That's what an accent is. So how do you actually learn an accent? You just got to practice it a whole lot. You can listen to a lot of foreign speakers. For instance, I've lived here in Montreal for 5 years, so I feel a little more confident in my accent Quebecois. But you can also, again, practice in front of other people. This is a hard one, though. And it's not one that you can often vary between characters. It's often a world-building thing. So let's put accents aside for now and not think about them and just focus on these other things. Second aspect is musicality. This is the different way that pitch shifts when you speak, and you can be very musical or you can be not musical at all when you speak. And this also plays a role in accent, but it can come in many different forms. And this can definitely define a character. Like this could be a whole character, just this voice I'm doing now, and the only thing I'm changing is my musicality. This next thing is tone. Tone often is not very good for defining a character because usually it's what conveys the emotion of a character, but it can sometimes define a character. For instance, a character who's a very manly man and always speaks like this. This is their defining feature, and then maybe you might vary musicality when they're speaking instead. The next thing is speed. This one is a hack for sure, especially for you GMs who are playing a lot of NPCs. If you're playing like 5 different goblins, and you're like, I don't have we're on goblin number 6, I don't know what to do. A goblin that speaks like this, and a goblin that speaks like this. The only thing I'm changing there is the speed, but there's a very clear difference between these two characters, right? Your players will be able to tell which one you're voicing. So don't underestimate speed. It's good. And like everything else, it can also vary if you define a character by one of these other things. Last thing is physicality. Let's have some fun. All right. So, let's workshop, shall we? This is by far the most underestimated part of voice acting. And by far, I think, is the funnest way to change your voice. And it can make a huge difference, and that's changing your body physically. What I mean by that is not altering your vocal cords or the volume or speed or everything else we talked about there, but rather all the other physical aspects of your body, and these can have very remarkable differences to your speech. It will come through, people will hear it. And it might also have some kind of psychosomatic effect, like it might change the other ways you're speaking. You'll probably notice that as we go through these. But just these raw all alter the way a voice sounds. Some more subtly, some very obviously. So, first one is where your brow sits. Eyebrows up high, eyebrows down low. First of all, this can change kind of the mood that you feel as you're playing, but it also literally physically changes the shape of your mouth. You might be able to feel it shaping the temporalis muscles here and changing your cheekbones as you move. So, what we're going to do is go through each of these in 2 different positions, and I want you all to repeat after me. Remember we talked about being vulnerable in front of other people? Here's your chance to practice. Let's do it. So, repeat after me. Eyebrows up. You don't have to repeat that part. Thank you, though. These are my cucumber sandwiches.
These are my cucumber sandwiches.
Right. Now bring those eyebrows down, furrow them as much as possible. Get your hands off my cucumber sandwiches. Nice. All right. Number 2, your head and neck posture. Don't mistake this for your torso. We'll get to that in a moment. But this is literally the position of your neck and your head on it. So you can hear a very obvious change in the quality of my voice here. You bring it forward, it makes it a bit more nasally. This may be a low status character. You bring it back, it creates a lot more resonance in your voice if you want to project. It may indicate a high status character as well, and obviously brings a little depth to the voice. So, head forward, These are my cucumber sandwiches. Head back. Get your hands off my cucumber sandwiches. Whoa, I can feel the authority in the room already. Wonderful. All right. Next is the position of the arms and the shoulders. So you bring your arms in. You can feel this limits your rib cage. It restricts the amount of air you're able to draw in. And like before, if you pull them back, you're creating more room for resonance. You can really suck in and take a lot of air into your diaphragm here, and very obvious change vocally here. So, shoulders in. These are my cucumber sandwiches. Get your hands off my cucumber sandwiches. All right, next. Where the jaw sits. This may be to the side, but more commonly used is your jaw either forward, maybe you're playing, I know I keep talking about orcs. Thanks for coming. I know I keep talking about orcs, but you know, a gruff character, and likewise, jaw all the way back, and a lot of variation in between can make very different characters. You know, this kind of affects the lips and so forth. So, jaw back, all the way back. These are my cucumber sandwiches. Jaw forward. Get your hands off my cucumber sandwiches. This is great. And you could probably hear while you were doing that, you were probably subconsciously changing some things there as well. Between this and this, maybe you're making your voice gruffer here, just naturally. That's good. That means it's working. All right. Next thing, this is one I can't physically show you, but you should be able to do. You're probably able to do this without too much effort, right? By blocking your nose, like so. But an understated one is also that muscle can also be pulled back further. And you can hear that makes you more breathy, that makes your voice a little more resonant in the upper chambers of your nose. This might be a character with a very large nose, or perhaps a very fine gentleman. So, nose blocked. These are my cucumber sandwiches. And if you can pull it back, get your hands off my cucumber sandwiches. It takes some practice, and also something else that helps with clearing that space is flaring your nostrils. If you want to, you can practice that one in the mirror. All right. Second to last one, position of the lips or mouth relative to the face. So you can have your lips up, you can have them down. That kind of requires the jaw as well, or side to side, you know, like some sort of sly fella. So lips up, if you want to pout. These are my cucumber sandwiches. And then maybe to the side of the mouth, get your hands up my cucumber sandwiches. I think it's impossible to do that without becoming a pirate or like from Brooklyn or something. All right, last one. This is the widths of the lips or mouth. It's how wide open your mouth is or how closed you may keep it. And by the way, this one you can also use to, in part, communicate gender. A more feminine voice may be more closed, and a very open mouth may be more masculine. So, mouth wide open. These are my cucumber sandwiches. And mouth very closed. Get your hands off my cucumber sandwiches. Yes, very demure, very demure. Excellent. All right. That's physicality. Thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause. Good job. That was amazing. You're all experts now. All right. Let's talk a little bit about emotion as well. Now, emotion is something that should not be constant for a character. It's something that changes over time, that adds dynamism. Whether you're playing a random NPC or a PC for 3 years, this will vary as the character goes through a scene, an encounter, a story, whatever. This scale is a way of acting emotion, but what I want you to keep in mind is that this is kind of a narrative arc for emotion, you might say. What we have is clearly a build, and then a big release, and then we go back down. So I'll talk about it more as we go, but if you'd like to practice with me, you can. I'll be demonstrating either way. But if you would like to face act or whatever this, feel free to follow along. So let's say we're playing a character that is sad. Let's go with the simple emotion, sadness. So we'll start at neutral. The character just doesn't feel sad. And then we're going to ramp up this sadness. In a game, this might take the form of like a player learning new information or seeing another PC die or something. So we give time to process this as you act, and we'll get to acting in the next section. This is just emotion. So it ramps up a little. The next level is just on the inside. The sadness is not expressed outwardly. It's just something you feel on the inside. I know we're getting some deep method acting here, but it'll become very apparent why this is helpful. We take that for a moment, and then we get up to the next level. This is when you start to feel it might become a little apparent. It's not really in the way your face looks. If we saw a still image of your face, you wouldn't look sad. It's more that the character is distracted. They're noticing things other people don't. They may talk in a different way. They have a glint in their eye. In other words, their eyes are focusing differently. The next level, this is when we start to see changes in the face. So if they're sad, their eyebrows might press in. Their focus shifting, their posture changes. They might slump down a little bit. They might look exhausted or depressed or in despair. This is something you can physicalize. You can think about physicalizing, but it's also something that can just come naturally as you allow the emotion to overcome you. Then the next thing is when the mouth starts to change shape. We really start to see that outward expression. The person's no longer trying to hide it. The vocal tone changes. Everybody knows now that this character is sad. This is how they're having a normal conversation now, and so on and so forth. And then level 5 is cartoonish. This is the Bugs Bunny, like, why? No! And the tears stream, and there's wailing and sobbing. And then immediately, or like within 10, 15 seconds, we go back to number 4. They calm down a little bit. Then number 3, number 2, and number 1, and so forth. And this is generally how emotion ramps up for a character. This makes it awesome for other players because they see this building and anticipate it, and then you explode just a little bit, then it goes back. I've never seen a PC do this, but let's say you're a GM. If you ever make a character that's always at level 5, it is an amazing way to make sure your players will always hate that character. So, which can come in handy, by the way. I've definitely had my players immediately nope out of a situation by just having a character who's like this the whole time. Oh my God. And vice versa. But if you want your players to like a character, stay here maybe 5 seconds and then go back. Okay, thank you. That section of explosion. All right, section 2. That's the end of that section. So questions about expressing emotion and so on and so forth. Or voice or whatever. Any questions, clarifications?
What if you run your voice out I don't know, you try too hard and suddenly you can't do it anymore?
Yeah, my advice is don't do that. The general rule of thumb is if you're doing a voice for longer than 5 minutes and it hurts your throat, stop. Just stop. Don't do it again. You learned your lesson.
Got it.
Throat coat, if you really want to get into it, does help, but there's more creative ways to get around that. I used to do this voice a lot. And it ruins your throat after a while. So I started defaulting to doing something more like this. And the more I practice it, the stronger it becomes anyways, and you don't have to go super hard. You just have to do the things that you're able to do for a long period of time,
Okay, got it.
Good question. Any other questions?
So
Yes.
in practice you do vocal mantras or
I literally just talk to myself while I'm doing the dishes in the shower. I'm like, I'm gonna go do some dishes or whatever.
So is that why you said scare your roommates?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I said, all of these skills, they're good to know mechanically, and practicing them helps. But once you get in front of other people, all those skills are gonna exit out the side of your brain, and you'll have to basically practice them again in that new mindset of being in front of other people. Be vulnerable. And by the way, the more vulnerable you are, the harder you go. I was going to talk about Andrew Fung. Thank you for reminding me. So, Andrew Fung, guy you saw earlier, now he's on like Kim's Convenience Store and stuff, but at the time, he was just my goofball improv teacher like a decade and a half ago at the Loose Moose. And he would, Andrew was infamous on stage for doing the worst accents. And I say accent, but it's accent, because no matter what accent you wanted him to do, when he got on stage, he would come on stage and just go immediately into what we affectionately called the bad Christopher Walken. He'd be like, could you be a British gentleman? And he'd come on stage and be like, yes, sure, I'm here, I'm in Britain, or whatever you call it. And just do that the whole time, no matter what he was trying. And the thing is, the audience and the other players and the director loved it. They would laugh, they would enjoy themselves, because it wasn't about the quality of the voice. It was the fact that he was just goddamn there and trying his hardest and putting his everything into this terrible voice every time. And that's what matters. If you take, again, what matters is that he was being vulnerable, that he was there, he was trying his hardest, and we as humans recognize that, and that's what made it fun. You don't have to be a goddamn Matt Mercer. You just gotta, I don't know why I pointed at Dwight there. You don't gotta be Dwight. You just gotta go up and goddamn give it your all. And the other people at the table will recognize that and do the same back to you. It's fun. Okay. Section 3. Let's talk about actually making narratively driven and interesting characters. Thank you for attending. Yeah, no worries. As the last section. So all you die-hard character builders out there, pay attention. First, I forgot I added this slide. Hey, folks. What are some characters you think are interesting for a narrative? Which ones have you noticed in media you've consumed recently that made the media very intriguing or drove the media for you?
They have a kind of tragic backstory.
A specific example.
Shadow the Hedgehog.
Shadow the Hedgehog. Great. Yes. Excellent example. Actually. Yes.
I'm watching a story about the spies, and this spy is the worst ever. But he's the best, really. He just hides it.
Nice. And he tries hard, right?
No. He's trying hard to show that he's bad.
Oh, okay. I like it. Yes?
This character, Colonel Cathcart is his name, but from Catch-22, but he's obsessed with status. He's constantly afraid that everyone hates him, but he's obsessed with proof.
Yes.
It really just dives into the fixation he has about what everybody else thinks about him.
Great example, and what a literary back pocket pullout. Damn, Catch-22, yes?
Guess maybe I don't know, Batman. His
Yeah.
personality, he wants to he's about devotes his whole life to catching criminals, so it doesn't happen to anyone else.
Yes. Another great example. I think the commonality between all of these characters is that they have something very specific that they care about, you might say.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's all they do during the narrative is work towards that. My example is Butcha from The Boys, which I binged this summer. And I really like Butcha because he literally tells the audience and the other characters constantly exactly what he wants and cares about. Constantly. I need to help me wife, son. And want to kill all them soups. That's all he says regularly. And yet, he's probably the most plot important character in the show. He's constantly driving it. He's an interesting and intriguing character because we want to know why he cares about this at first, and then we want to know what he's going to do. The point being, this is an explicitly driven character. We know exactly why he does, and yet he's the most intriguing of the show. So, what the heck am I talking? What's this all lead into? Objectives and tactics. This is a concept that comes from playwriting. It's probably also in screenwriting. You may have encountered in other theatrical disciplines or writing disciplines. It's something that I use for RPGs these days because I find it's an extremely helpful framework for thinking about what makes a driven and narratively compelled character. So what the hell is an objective? An objective is something a character desires, the driving force of their actions throughout a narrative. In other words, it's what they want. It's what they want above anything else. They may have multiple objectives that conflict, but most characters don't. They have one thing that they want. The important thing for us is that characters with objectives have coherent and interesting reasons for doing the things they do. That means a few things. For the other players, that means the character is predictable. The other players know what this character wants. They know what that character will be compelled by. They can give you offers as a player playing that character. As the GM, it also helps the GM integrate that character into the story because they know what exactly is going to drive that character. And it gives you something to always fall back on when you are playing that character, the one thing that they want. So what's a tactic? A tactic is how a character changes the way they're trying to accomplish their objective in a scene. If you've ever read a play and you noticed that at seemingly random intervals, it says beat, beat, beat after bits of dialogue, sometimes in the middle of people talking, what that indicates is a change in tactic. The character still wants the same thing. They're still trying to affect the other person in the scene, but they're changing the way they're trying to accomplish that. So, my favorite example, a mom who wants to put her 4-year-old son to bed so she can drink some wine and watch Netflix. Her objective is very clear, but she's going to go through a few different tactics within the scene, or the encounter, we might call it. So, tactic number 1. Timmy, it's time to go to bed. I've made your bed. You got a glass of warm milk. You got your jammies on. Let's go. I don't want to go to bed. Okay, mom sees that tactic number 1 is unsuccessful, so she changes tactics. Usually immediately. This happens naturally. You go to bed right now, mister. I'm going to count down from 10. 10, 9, 8, 7. I know you don't mean anything when you count down from 10. And so on and so forth. And we can see there the tactic change came in the form of an emotional change. She went to anger to try to achieve her objective. But she sees that doesn't work. Change tactic again. All right, if you go to bed now, tomorrow we can go to your favorite ice cream place. I don't like ice cream anymore, and so on and so forth. And this continues ad nauseum until the encounter, if you want to call it that, is resolved, until something changes, until a side capitulates, until a character is affected by the other person's objective. In RPGs, that's often combat. That's resolved, and that's why we have dice, is to resolve that sort of conflict. But it can also be resolved through simple dialogue and change. So what's the practical application of these concepts? Number 1 is making interesting characters that are driven and do things even in the background because we always know what they're working towards. Thanks for coming. Number 2 is, this is for GMs, is Boblin the Goblin here. If you're running a game and your players walk into a tavern and they ask, I want to talk to that random goblin over there. And you're like, oh God, I don't know who this is. This is a random goblin. What do you do with Boblin the Goblin? What I have found is you don't need to have a cohesive and interesting backstory. Going back to getting yourself into trouble, all you need to think of for this goblin is his objective. What does the goblin want? Maybe, what does he want? He wants the people to jump in the river with him. We don't know why. You can figure that out later. It doesn't matter. Maybe the players will be suspicious, but now they walk up to the goblin and they're like, hey, what's up? What are you doing here? And then the goblin can immediately be like, just looking for folks to come to the river with me. And then suddenly it's an extremely intriguing interaction. The players are like, the river? What's in the river? A raccoon named Toby, or whatever. It doesn't matter. The point is you're playing to your objective. And when you play to an objective, this character will act consistently, trying to get the players to the river. And maybe you can come up with another objective once they're in the river. I don't know. Maybe he's a minion of some sort of water demon there, or he has a treasure to give them. It doesn't matter. Play to the objective. But the last and most important one is making all the players stars. Ooh, giving them all characters they can get into. How does that happen? Basically, what I've started doing when I run games, and this happens naturally, like a lot of games, like Masks, for instance, ask questions that naturally give this. But games like 5e, Pathfinder, whatever, do not do this. And I've started doing this anyways, which is I sit down with any players I'm onboarding into my games, and I say, I don't care if your backstory is like a paragraph or 10 pages. I don't care what your build is, as long as you're not stepping on other people's toes. All I care about is that your character has something specific, some material thing that they want, that we understand, and something specific that they value. Just give me one thing that they want and one thing that they try to achieve that through. And that can vary, that can change over time, but we need a start. So it could be a magic item. It could be to gain a title. It could be to get revenge, to save their homeland. Something specific that you can tie their narrative into your story with, or that you can constantly appeal to as a player with. And then something they value. This is kind of informs the player's default tactics. So let's say, going back to the orc, let's say they're making a classic barbarian orc. What does your character want? He wants to become the chieftain of his tribe. He wants the respect of his tribe. He wants to become the chieftain of it. Great, that's a very specific thing that can be gained, and we know how to do it. And something specific they value. He values strength above all else. So now he has something specific he can embody. And just because he embodies strength doesn't mean that has to be his default tactic is combat. It could be he gauges people by how big their muscles are, or he challenges people to arm wrestling contests, or whatever. The point being, you're the player, you as a player now have the tool with your characters to always have something to try and go back to, and some way to always capture your character and characterize them, and try to achieve their objective. I know I sound like a broken record here. I just really want to emphasize these two things, because I swear to God, when you think about it this way, it will change how you role play. It's been probably the most helpful tool I've ever added to my kit as a GM, aside from Stars and Wishes, which I would also very much encourage you to. All right. That's it. Last section. That's it. We're done with the talking. We're done with the talking. Thank you. So we'll just take questions until people got to leave or we're done or whatever. Thank you for attending.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for sticking around. Do y'all have any questions?
How many times Raccoon Toby has been in your stories?
Would you believe 0? I was improvising.
Yeah.
Hey, can you introduce Toby into our game?
That's neither here nor there.
Actually, just now, the image made me think of a good example of failing gracefully. When I was like 16 playing D&D, and I was trying to describe that a goblin was a goblin chief, and I said, I don't know, he's kind of like, one of the goblins seems like he's a higher status kind of goblin. My friend seized on that and decided that he was wearing a suit and bow tie. And I still remember that 10 years later, because it was just that moment of running across a random goblin chief that was dressed in formal wear was more memorable than anything else that happened in that session.
That's what it's all about, you know? Or the classic, you come to a warehouse. Is that a house that turns into a wolf when there's a moon? Now you have a whole, encounter.
It's kind of like what's it called? The gazebo of death, or whatever the fuck it's called. You ever heard that one?
Yes, yeah. Any other questions? I mean, I know y'all can ask me afterwards, but it's for the camera.
Oh, must make you look good.
Yes?
Make you look good. We gotta put you on a pedestal here.
I don't, whatever. What do you got a question?
Yeah, gosh.
You don't need to think of a question if you don't have one. It's okay to not
I got
ask
nothing.
things.
I'm silent.
We're good.
Okay.
I'm like bone
Cool.
silent.
What that tells me is that this was a complete success.
So when you say make all players stars, is pretty much giving them their 15 minutes of fame. Everybody should have a part in the story.
I'm not a fan of the concept of spotlights. I find that often comes up in conversations about games. And, when you're at the point where you're apportioning time to people and trying to give them their 15 minutes or whatever, what that means is you've already reached the point where the players, and you possibly use the GM, are not naturally making space for each other and are not naturally lifting each other up. Sometimes that does have to happen. You notice a player's like being quiet and you go out to them. That's fine. But when you're like, I'm going to set a timer or whatever, the whole point is that by doing these things, that giving all of your players a point of big emotional conflict, giving all of your players their big Oscar moment or whatever, should happen naturally as you give offers that inspire them and as they give each other offers. And as maybe when you give stars and wishes, you start Pavloving them to do nice things by being like, I really want to give a star to Tasha for really setting up the other players there by having them go ahead into the cave. It works. If you do that, then the concept of 15 minutes or spotlight or whatever should never even enter your brain.
Well, yeah, I think I have one. What if you
Yes.
what if you give your characters like a goal and a personality trait, and they still come off as boring? Like, I don't know, like they're like, oh, you're angry because your whole family died. Boring. I've seen that a lot.
What do we say about the fear of being boring? Right? That's it is possible to make a boring character, but I promise you could play John Smith and he never had any problems in his life and he just wants to go on an adventure and he has one objective, and that's to find the lost ruby. As long as you have John Smith care the most he can about finding that goddamn ruby, he will be a very interesting character for the other players to play with. I guarantee it.
Okay.
Yes. But the opposite of that is, I think, to your example, when a player comes with a classic tiefling rogue and it's like, her name's Aloysius and she never knew her family and all she does is carve knives and assassinate. That's a boring character. Why? Because they have nothing they care about. They don't have anything. You've made a nihilistic character that doesn't care about achieving anything. But if we take that grimdark edgelord rogue and have her care about getting revenge on the people who assassinated her family, suddenly we have a character who is focusing in whenever there's anything related to her family, constantly working towards that goal, and now you have a very interesting character.
Okay.
Yeah. Good question. Any other questions? Okay. Then get out of here. Thank you for coming.
Yes, sir.
And thank you, Festival Draconis, for hosting another great panel.
Are you playing a game today?
I'll be around. I don't know. I'll look at what tables are available. All right.
And thank you, everyone, for participating in this panel. And thank you for our sponsors, Arcana Creation, Litère d'Obsidia, and Gnome Archiviste. Thank you all.
Thanks. Goodbye.